Two mummies are sitting in a tomb in the Valley of the Kings right now. They have been there since 1817. Both are female. Both are from Egypt's royal 18th dynasty. One of them might be the most famous queen who ever lived. And after years of DNA testing, CT scans, expert announcements, and global headlines, science still cannot tell us which one she is, or whether she is either of them at all. This is the story of what the DNA actually says, what it rules out, what it cannot prove, and why the search for Nefertiti has become one of the most fascinating and most frustrating cold cases in the history of archaeology. Let's start with the face, because the face is where everything begins. In December 1912, a German archaeologist named Ludwig Borchardt was excavating the ruins of Amarna, a city that had been buried under sand for more than 3,000 years, when his team uncovered something in the rubble of a sculptor's workshop. He picked it up, he looked at it, and then he wrote just one sentence in his diary that day. Work absolutely exceptional. Description is useless. Must be seen. He knew instantly what he was holding. A 3,300-year-old painted limestone bust of Queen Nefertiti, wife of the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, co-leader of the most radical religious revolution in ancient Egyptian history. The most perfectly preserved royal portrait ever found. At 18.5 inches tall, with its almond-shaped eyes, its long, elegant neck, its blue, flat-topped crown, its calm and absolute authority, it is still considered one of the greatest works of art in the ancient world. Borchardt knew exactly what he was holding. And so he lied. He showed Egyptian inspectors an unflattering photograph, poorly lit, taken at an angle designed to make the bust look ordinary. He told officials it was made of common gypsum, not the finely worked painted limestone it actually was. He listed it in the official records as the portrait of a minor princess, not a queen. At the time, Egyptian law required all excavation finds to be split equally between the excavators and Egypt. Borchardt used the deception to ensure the bust ended up in the German column of the split. It left Egypt in a crate. It arrived in Berlin. And for the next 11 years, it sat hidden in a private collection, shown only to select visitors, while Nefertiti's name remained largely unknown outside of specialist circles, because we have her face. We do not have her body. And the story of the search for that body is one of the most complicated and genuinely unresolved puzzles in the history of ancient Egypt. To understand why finding her is so difficult, you need to understand what happened to this woman's world. Nefertiti was not simply a queen consort standing decoratively beside her husband. On the temple walls at Amarna, she is depicted performing rituals previously reserved exclusively for pharaohs. She is shown smiting enemies, wearing the flat-topped blue crown, depicted at the same scale as Akhenaten himself, which in Egyptian artistic convention signaled equal authority. She co-led the most radical religious revolution Egypt had ever seen. Akhenaten shut down every temple in Egypt, fired thousands of priests, declared all the gods false, and established worship of a single deity, the Aten, the sun disk. He moved the entire royal court to a brand new city built from scratch in the desert, Amarna. And Nefertiti stood at the center of all of it. Then, around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, she vanishes from the record. No death announcement, no burial record, no tomb inscription, no farewell. She is simply gone from the official documents. That disappearance has never been explained. When the revolution collapsed after Akhenaten's death, the priests and military officials who restored the old religion did not just reverse his policies. They demolished everything. They tore down his temples, stone by stone. They chiseled his name off monuments across Egypt. They abandoned Amarna and let it fill with sand. And Nefertiti, the woman whose image had appeared on every major surface of the new city, was systematically erased alongside him. The erasure was so thorough that, for centuries, historians barely knew she'd existed. Then Borchardt's team uncovered the bust in 1912, inside the ruins of the sculptor Thutmose's workshop in Amarna, a reference piece that was apparently left behind when the city was abandoned around 1330 BCE, sealed under rubble, preserved by the same desert that buried everything else, and never found again until that December morning. Now, 300 years after they tried to erase her, we have her face. But we still do not know where her body is. The search has produced 3 major candidates. Each one has been examined. Each one has led somewhere, and then stopped short of certainty. The first candidate is known as the Younger Lady. In 1898, archaeologist Victor Loret opened tomb KV35 in the Valley of the Kings and found something unexpected. A cache of royal mummies that had been hidden there centuries after their original burials by ancient priests trying to protect them from tomb robbers. Among them was an unnamed female mummy. She had no inscriptions, no jewelry, nothing to identify her. For decades, she was simply filed away. Then, in 2010, a landmark DNA study changed everything. Published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, the study was led by Zahi Hawass and Dr. Sahar Salem, a professor of radiology at Cairo University, along with an international research team. The results were remarkable. The younger lady was identified as the biological mother of Tutankhamun, and she was the full sister of Akhenaten, both of them children of Amenhotep III and Queen Tai. Headlines around the world immediately suggested this could be Nefertiti. But here is where the science requires honesty, and where most accounts of this story start cutting corners. Nefertiti's known titles nowhere include the designation of king's daughter or king's sister. There is no inscription anywhere in Egypt that identifies Nefertiti as a daughter of Amenhotep III. The scholarly consensus, based on everything we know about her background, identifies her as the daughter of a high official named Ai, who later became pharaoh himself after Tutankhamun's death. Her sister was a woman named Mutnojmet. If the younger lady was Akhenaten's full sister, his blood sibling through both parents, and Nefertiti was not his sister but the daughter of a different family, then the younger lady almost certainly is not Nefertiti. The 2010 DNA study did not move us closer to finding Nefertiti. On that specific question, it moved us further away. The second candidate is more complicated and more recent. Tomb KV-21 was discovered in 1817 by explorer Giovanni Belzoni in the Valley of the Kings. Inside were 2 female mummies, both badly damaged. No heads attached to bodies, no inscriptions, no identifying objects. For nearly 2 centuries, nobody could extract usable DNA from either of them. The remains were too degraded. Labeled KV-21A and KV-21B, they sat in the academic record as 2 unknowns with no way forward. In September 2022, Zahi Hawass held a press event and told reporters he was certain he would identify Nefertiti's mummy within a month or 2. He pointed at KV-21B as his primary candidate. He told Newsweek, and numerous other outlets reported it as near certain, that he would announce in October 2022 the identities of both Nefertiti and her daughter, Ankhesenamun, Tutankhamun's wife. October 2022 came and went. No announcement. In late 2023, Hawass told The Sun he planned to announce Nefertiti's identity within 4 months. In December 2024, he told another interviewer he was pretty sure Nefertiti would be found in 2025. As of 2026, no peer-reviewed study has confirmed the identity of either KV-21 mummy. The definitive announcement has not come. Here is what the actual evidence does say. CT scans of KV-21B conducted by Dr. Sahar Salem showed a woman estimated to be over 40 years of age, approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall. That height is notable, unusually tall for ancient Egyptian women, and consistent with Nefertiti's depictions in art, where she's shown as tall and slender. DNA analysis showed markers consistent with the 18th Dynasty royal line, and some possible relationship between KV-21A and KV-21B, suggesting they may be mother and daughter. KV-21A may tentatively be the mother of the 2 small infant mummies found in Tutankhamun's tomb, which would point toward Ankhesenamun, who lost 2 pregnancies with Tutankhamun. But the DNA profile of KV-21B is incomplete. The damage to the remains limited what could be extracted and analyzed. What the evidence shows is that KV-21B fits somewhere in the royal family tree of the 18th dynasty. Whether she is Nefertiti specifically, or her sister Mutnojmet, or another wife or daughter of Akhenaten, cannot be determined from the data currently available. The evidence is consistent with Nefertiti. It does not prove she is Nefertiti. Those are 2 very different things, and the difference matters. What the DNA also revealed, and what makes KV-21B's physical condition so significant, is the genetic cost this family had been paying for generations. The 2010 JAMA study examined 11 royal mummies from the 18th dynasty and found that Tutankhamun's parents were full siblings, brother and sister, both children of Amenhotep III and Queen Tia. The Egyptian royal tradition of close relative marriage was considered sacred, a way of preserving the divine bloodline. But the biological cost over generations was severe. Tutankhamun himself showed multiple inherited conditions. He had a serious bone disease in his left foot, a vascular necrosis that would have made walking genuinely painful and likely required a support aid. Over 130 walking sticks were found in his tomb. He also carried genetic markers for malaria, with Plasmodium falciparum DNA, the deadliest strain found in his remains. A 19-year-old king walking with a cane, fighting malaria, with bones already compromised by generations of inbreeding. That is what the most powerful bloodline in the ancient world had done to itself by the time it reached him. CT scans of KV-21B show damage to the skull, evidence of chest compression, and arms forced into unnatural positions. Dr. Salem noted that some of these injuries appeared to have occurred at or near the time of death, not from centuries of mummification decay. In someone whose bones were already weakened by the genetic load this dynasty carried, Injuries that might be survivable in a healthier person could have been fatal. The physical story of KV-21b is disturbing, whether that is the story of a death by violence, a death by accident, or simply the story of a body badly handled in the centuries after burial. The available evidence does not yet tell us. Now let's talk about the theory that many Egyptologists consider the most intellectually serious of all the possibilities surrounding Nefertiti's disappearance. Not death, not exile, transformation. Here is the evidence. In the final years of Akhenaten's reign, inscriptions began giving Nefertiti titles that were traditionally male and exclusively pharaonic. According to Egyptologist Dr. Joyce Tildesley, whose scholarship on this period is considered foundational, this was unprecedented. No Egyptian queen had ever received such honors. A quarry inscription at Deir Abu Hinnis, dating to year 16 of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, confirms that Nefertiti was still alive and politically active, very close to the end of his rule. After Akhenaten's death, a pharaoh appeared called Smenkhkare. This ruler governed for fewer than 3 years, left almost no records, had no confirmed tomb found, no confirmed mummy identified. What records do survive have in many cases been altered, male references scratched over what appear to have been earlier female ones. Several gold artifacts found inside Tutankhamun's tomb show signs of hurried modification, female identifiers removed and replaced with masculine ones, as if the original owner's identity had been deliberately changed before reuse. Some scholars argue these items were originally created for a female ruler, possibly Nefertiti ruling as Smenkhkare, and then repurposed for Tutankhamun's burial when the boy king died unexpectedly. The chronological evidence is striking. If Nefertiti was alive in year 16 and Akhenaten ruled for 17 years, she was present at the very end of his reign or possibly beyond it. The transition from queen to pharaoh would not have been unprecedented. Hatshepsut had done it 150 years earlier, ruling as pharaoh in her own right, even adopting the ceremonial false beard. And what happened to Hatshepsut's memory afterward? Her images were defaced. Her name was erased from king lists. A woman had held the throne, and the men who came after her spent generations making sure history would not remember it. If Nefertiti became Smenkhkare, her erasure was not just about Akhenaten's religious heresy. It was about eliminating the evidence that a woman had held the highest office in Egypt, which would mean that what we call the mystery of Nefertiti's disappearance was not a disappearance at all. It was a promotion, and then a deliberate erasure of that promotion by the people who came after. The pattern around this family's women is impossible to ignore once you see it. Nefertiti vanishes from official records around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign. Her daughter Mekhetaten appears to have died around the same time, possibly in childbirth, mourned in a relief on the royal tomb wall at Amarna, showing the family beside her body, with a nurse holding an infant nearby. Her daughter Ankhesenamun married the boy King Tutankhamun when she was around 13 and he was around 8, a political necessity, not a choice. She lost 2 pregnancies, the small mummies found in Tutankhamun's tomb. When Tutankhamun died at 19, she wrote one of the most remarkable documents in all of ancient history. The letter was found not in Egypt, but in the ruins of the Hittite capital at Hattusa in modern Turkey. It is part of a text called the Deeds of Suppiluliuma. An Egyptian queen, referred to by the Hittite rendering of her title, wrote to the Hittite king with a message so extraordinary that even its recipient could not believe it. "My husband has died and I have no son. They say about you that you have many sons. You might give me one of your sons to become my husband. I would not wish to take one of my subjects as a husband, I'm afraid." The Hittite king Suppiluliuma was so shocked by this letter that the account records he said something for posterity. "Nothing like this has ever happened to me in my entire life. A queen of the most powerful civilization on earth, writing to the king of a rival empire, asking for a foreign prince to marry her so she would not be forced to marry an Egyptian, and admitting openly, in writing, that she was afraid." Suppiluliuma sent a son, Prince Zananza, to Egypt to marry her. He never arrived. He was killed on the road. The Hittite records say Egypt was responsible. Suppiluliuma was devastated and furious. The murder of Zananza triggered a war between the Hittite Empire and Egypt. And Ankhesenamun, if she was the author of that letter, vanished from history. A ring bearing the names of both Ankhesenamun and the elderly official Ai, who seized the throne after Tutankhamun, was found in 1931. After that, nothing. No tomb confidently identified, no further records, gone. Every woman in Nefertiti's immediate family was erased from the official record within a single generation. And yet none of the erasure worked. Because a sculptor named Thutmose left a model in his workshop in Amarna when the city was abandoned around 1330 BCE. It was not meant to be a final piece. Most scholars believe it was a reference bust, a working model used to guide other artists who needed to replicate the queen's features. It was ordinary studio equipment. It had no reason to survive. But the city fell and was buried, and the bust lay in the rubble of Thutmose's studio for 32 centuries, until one December morning in 1912, when a German archaeologist picked it up and recognized in an instant that the world had just changed. They tried to erase Nefertiti. They failed. 3,000 years later, her face is the most recognized image in Egyptian history. Her bust is valued at 400 million euros. It is the centerpiece of one of the greatest museums in Europe. And it was stolen, and Egypt wants it back. That argument is getting sharper by the year, now that the Grand Egyptian Museum stands open beside the Giza pyramids, the largest archaeological museum ever built, purpose-designed to house and preserve exactly this kind of treasure. As of right now, in 2026, here is where everything stands. The younger lady, ruled out by the DNA, the family relationship does not match what we know about Nefertiti's background. KV21b, possible, unproven. The mummy fits the 18th Dynasty royal line. The age estimate aligns with Nefertiti's. The height is consistent. But the DNA profile is incomplete. No peer-reviewed publication has confirmed the identification. Hawass has been promising an announcement since 2022, and the announcement has not come. The hidden chamber behind Tutankhamun's tomb wall, definitively ruled out in 2018 by the most advanced ground-penetrating radar survey ever conducted there. No hidden chambers, no artificial blocking walls. The anomalies that sparked the theory were natural limestone variations. Nefertiti remains missing. The most powerful woman in the ancient world, co-architect of a religious revolution that shook one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, possibly the last ruler of that revolution disguised under a male name. Certainly the face whose image outlasted every attempt to destroy it. Her body has not been found. Her tomb has not been identified. Her story is not finished. And the question at the center of all of it is not really about archaeology. It is about ownership. Who gets to hold the past? Who gets to decide where the most important objects of a civilization belong? A painted limestone bust is sitting in Berlin right now in a glass case in a domed hall, visited by people who read the museum label and move on. And in Cairo, a new museum stands ready. In Egypt, says simply, "Bring her home." Whatever you believe about the science, whatever you think happened to this woman in the last years of the 14th century BC, whether she was erased or exiled or murdered or transformed into a pharaoh under a false name, or died quietly of a plague that killed half her family, one thing is certain. She is still here, in the stone, in the DNA, in the headlines, in the argument that has not stopped for a century. She is still here, and they still have not found her. And that, all by itself, is the most extraordinary thing about Nefertiti. They tried so hard to make sure the world would never know her name, and it is the only name from her entire era that almost everyone on Earth recognizes.